The guards are back on duty, but is Canada ready for reality? That is the topic of tonight's Byline. I'm here at the National War Memorial, where today the ceremonial guard took up their post 2 days after the shooting that shocked the nation. And when it happened, people asked me, will this wake people up? 2 days later, my response is some people don't want to be woken up, made aware of what's going on around them. We've had 9/11, we've had countless terror plots, we've had hundreds of Canadians join ISIS and other jihadist movements around the globe. This week, before the events that happened here, we witnessed 2 Canadian soldiers attacked walking in a parking lot, of all places. People seem to be forgetting that, well, we lost Warrant Officer Patrice Vincent this week, killed by Martin Ahmed Rouleau. That was just on Monday, everyone. We can't forget that. Yesterday in New York City, another recent Muslim convert with Islamist leanings attacked 2 police officers on the street in broad daylight with an axe. That is unbelievable, and it's shocking a city that's seen far too many terrorist attacks and plots already. Last Saturday, we learned of 3 teenage girls with Somali backgrounds who were returned home after they were intercepted trying to get to Syria to become brides for ISIS warriors. That's happening in Toronto. They weren't arrested, they weren't charged, just handed back to their parents. And now we have 2 soldiers dead in the same week. I think the response of most sane Canadians is rightly one of horror and outrage. We should all be outraged. We should all be angry. We're under attack, not just from Rouleau and Michael Zehaf-Bibeau, but from all the other radicals out there joining the fight, cheering on these attacks. Outrage, in my view, is the proper response. But then there's the disappointing side of all of this. From the far left-wing website, funded by union dues from millions of hardworking Canadians, comes this gem essentially saying that Canada had this coming and that MPs now know the terror they've inflicted around the world. This is a shocking piece, people. You need to pay attention to this. It reads, like those in Afghanistan who suffered 13 years of Canadian bombardment, upwards of 1 billion Canadian bullets fired, night raids, transfers to torture, and the daily indignities of life under military occupation, those parliamentarians with the power to declare war and send somebody else to overseas to fight it for them felt in a relatively limited fashion what it's like for millions of the world's war-weary populations. If you're a union member, look up this article, send it to your steward or your union leadership and ask them why your dues are funding this kind of garbage. Then there's the conspiracy theories. I've received emails explaining how the official story can't be true, that the same man couldn't attack Parliament at the War Memorial and then run on to Parliament. Not humanly possible, I've been told. And besides, how could he get in? Well, these emails typically come from people that have never been to this site or walked the halls of Parliament. They also come from people that will ignore the evidence in the form of surveillance footage released by the RCMP that shows Zehaf-Bibeau's actions on both sites. I've received emails like this one calling the whole thing a false flag. I've been told the same about Monday's attack that killed Warrant Officer Vincent. And depending on who you believe, these are not attacks by radical Muslims, but attacks by those that support enhanced security measures, who want tighter gun control, who just want to make Muslims look bad. That there are conspiracy theories over all of this within hours of the attacks is just mind-boggling. But what's truly mind-boggling is the response of those that refuse to call this terrorism. Apparently these attacks, well, don't fit the real definition of terrorism, I'm told. That's somehow giving the word a new meaning, a different meaning, if you say that these 2 lone wolf attacks in Canada and the attack in New York are terrorist acts. But that's garbage. That's utter nonsense. I picked up my friend Mark's old 1986 Little Oxford Dictionary that he keeps on his desk at the office and looked up the definition written of terrorism there. It says a practice of using violent and intimidating methods, especially to secure political ends. Well, tell me these weren't acts of violence. Tell me these weren't meant to intimidate. Tell me that there were not political motives. If you tell me any of these things, you're lying or deluded. The attacks in Saint-Jean and in Ottawa are both acts of terrorism, but some can't say it. NDP leader Tom Mulcair didn't call this terrorism in the House yesterday. I haven't heard him use that word for any of the attacks this week. And Green Party leader Elizabeth May put this down to a couple of crazies.
If I were a betting person, Mr. Speaker, and good for my bank account that I'm not, I would put money on this being the act of isolated, disturbed, deeply troubled men who are drawn to something crazy.
I have no doubt that Rouleau and Zehaf Bibo weren't in their right head. I mean, to reject everything you were raised with, the society that nurtured you, tells us something, but we can't excuse this away by simply saying these were disturbed men. We have to call it terrorism, something that Liberal leader Justin Trudeau just can't do.
Mr. Trudeau, is there a reason you haven't referred to the attacks this week as terrorism?
I'm waiting for the appropriate authorities to refer them as terrorists.
And Prime Minister Stephen Harper has called these acts of terrorism. He's linked them to the Islamist ideology. All week, I've avoided making this about party politics, but there does come a time when we have to evaluate what our leaders are saying. We have to examine what their positions are. And in the face of 2 terror attacks, we're told by most of our party leaders that they won't call this terrorism. Trudeau, like several police chiefs, and Mulcair as well, well, they've tried to assure us this has nothing to do with Islam, but then they've reached out to the nation's Muslim communities to assure them everything's okay. As I said yesterday, why have the outreach to the Muslim community if this has nothing to do with Islam? So to answer the question I posed at the beginning, will this wake people up? No. Some people want to bury their heads in the sand. They want to ignore reality. Well, the reality staring them in the face. They want to continue living in their own fantasy world. We likely can't change that, but we can make sure that we know who they are, where they stand, and we can make sure that we know the truth. And that's the byline. Scenes of the Honour Guard coming back into position earlier this afternoon. Friend and Toronto Sun columnist Joe Warmington's been in town covering this for the past couple days. Joe, you were at the scene of the attack in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu, but you were here for the Honour Guard coming back on site. Tell me what that was like.
Well, it was historic because basically what they did there was come back and reclaim this battlefield which we're standing on now, and sending a message that this is Canadian turf, and that those men and women in uniform are wearing their uniforms proudly and defending the country. And the Prime Minister and everyone on down felt safe. And it was nice to see them back like that.
We understand why for the first day after. I mean, the Prime Minister came, why they didn't have the Honour Guard here. The Prime Minister came to lay a wreath yesterday and was told he couldn't go past the yellow tape. Still an active crime scene, but now that it's no longer an active crime scene, good to see the soldiers back up.
Yeah, and again, I hope they're armed because this is a war zone. We're at war. And, you know, again, you usually do, Brian, have nailed it. We shouldn't be complacent here now. I don't think we should be paranoid because we're in good hands. But we are at war, and this is a war zone that we're in now.
Earlier this afternoon, you were down by the funeral home where Corporal Cirillo was being taken from the funeral home, put into a hearse, traveling down Veterans Memorial Highway, Highway 416 here in Ontario, and then onto the Highway of Heroes along 401. A lot of people, that was right in my neighborhood. You don't normally see a lot of people on the side of those streets, on the medians. Lots of people out today.
Yeah, and sort of the thing that's sort of ringing in my brain is seeing his mom come out and have to be helped out to get into the limo. That is something that's sort of in there, and I'm having a hard time dealing with it. It was so sad. And, you know, I just want to say that I don't say the terrorist name. I haven't said it in a column yet. I may have to at some point. But thanks a lot. This is what you did. You took away a beautiful son from this mother and took away a great warrior for the whole country. So thanks a lot. You know what, to your point, yeah, I mean, everybody's out, everybody's together. There's only a few idiots that think that this is an isolated incident, had nothing to do with.
Well, unfortunately, some of them are in powerful positions.
Yeah,
though.
they are, but they're in powerful positions. But our Prime Minister is in charge here, and we've got a good one, and he's got it right, and his cabinet's. We're in good hands. Lord knows what will happen if he's not there, but right now he's there, and thank God for that.
All right, I want to ask you about having been to 2 places that you say are war zones, because we can't forget Warrant Officer Patrice Vincent earlier this week in Saint Jean. But you've described the parking lot that he was run down in, and this site, the National War Memorial, as battlefields. And that'll strike a lot of people as odd, maybe going over the top. But I think you've got a good argument for it. Explain.
Yeah, it's not over the top. They were both killed in the war with ISIS, and we have
And with everyone that shares that ideology.
and everybody that shares the ideology, right? And we've got men and women on their way over there now. They're there now in Kuwait. They're fighting a war, and the war was taken to us here. The fact that the enemy were people that were raised here and all that is irrelevant. You know, you're not allowed to say Islamic terrorism. You're not allowed to say anything. But I am allowed to say, this is free, that this is a war zone. It's a battlefield right here. And, you know, look at the history of this place, 1914, and if you go over here, you'll see when they built this in 1939, they had a big ceremony with the same kind of crowd that they had here today when the Prime Minister was here. And, you know, the unknown soldier is there, and now we have, you know, Corporal Nathan, and you know what, anybody who says it's anything different, this was not an accident, this did happen. Same thing with Tim Hortons. I was infuriated when I was there, because nobody cared there. Now, they're good people, and they didn't understand, oh, this is just a crazy guy who did this. No, he waited 2 hours. He had all the ideology. He was radicalized in a mosque there, and it was a blatant act of war.
This is in St. John.
In St. John, and the next day it happened here. We don't know when it's going to happen again. We hope it doesn't. But we've got to get our heads out of the sand and accept that this is what it is. And so if it has to be me that say it, I don't think I'm being controversial. I think that what they're saying is being controversial.
I think, Joe, that you're on side with the majority of Canadians, and I think we are as well, across Sun News Network, because I think most Canadians are outraged by this. But why do you think so many people at the top, so many in the chattering classes, are worried about offending? They don't want to say it's terrorism. They want to say it has nothing to do with Islam, but they have the outreach letters like Tom Mulcair issued today to the Muslim community. You can't have it both ways on all of this.
You can't, and it's insulting to the Muslim community to do that as well, because, you know, the Muslim community is not these guys that did this. They're individuals that were following a radical ideology. So focus on that. I mean, when you see the imams here or people that are of Islamic faith, nobody thinks that they're involved in it. They're all Canadians. Everybody's Canadian. But the terrorists in this particular situation are Islamic, and they're radical. And so we saw some of the Muslim leaders speak out, and as they should, and they did. For some reason, some of these other leaders, Justin Trudeau and others, don't seem to want to do it. He stood right where I am right now, or actually was down a little bit over here when it was locked the other day. What was he here for? What did he think what was he doing? What was he visiting? This is a battleground where a Canadian was murdered in the war against fundamental radical Islam in the name of that. And that's the way it is. And you know, again, if somebody could show me something different, then I'll apologize for what I'm saying. But that is not, they're not going to be able to show me that, because that's what this is. And I try to call it for what it is.
All right. That's why we appreciate you coming by, Joe. Thanks so much.